Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in Mendham. Yes, so the theme for the week. Irritating. The word fetish came to mind a few times, and kind of describing how people are kind of conditioned to be a certain kind of human. And that I was sort of thinking that there's only a certain kind of human who's, the problem. You can always, it's not like the human race or something generic about human beings that makes them just bad or lousy or rotten. That it is the specific kind, and that you could sort of point to this idea that ignorance is a bad thing. It makes humans dangerous at minimum, you could say. Unleashes all kinds of destructive potential. A lack of sophistication or sense of playing by rules, or just being an acting upper, or just being uncivilized in a sense. Not recognizing that some of the rules are necessary. We have to drive on the right side of the road, and your car has to be non-lethal in its function, and that these rules are necessary. That people just don't want to play by rational rules. They want to maintain unsustainable curves, and keep buying things on the third credit card or whatever they're just things that can't work, and can kind of be known that it can't work, and that the human race doesn't really fail because some of us recognize that these things can't work and that they're unsustainable and that we can't keep doing them, and we're saying stop doing the unsustainable stupid things. Define the words right, understand the concepts correctly, or you'll fail. And so the idea that this problem with human communication sort of came up in a Piro video. Piro was sort of griping about some of the problem with just even having a civil conversation with people, where they don't just sit there and call you a Nazi. As soon as you mention any kind of for some people, like the Mullihu followers, the libertarians, as soon as you mention anything about the idea of a civilization requiring that there be rules, that you can't just let your dog run free in the park, and, certain kind of things, because it's not so much about, well, you can sue me if my dog does something. Well, yeah, I'm going to sue you after you killed my kid. What's the point of that? I want to prevent your dog from hurting my kid. I don't want to sue you to not fix it with the non-money you don't have. So that's not a solution. The solution is to prevent. And that means you have to obey rules and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, this came up like with free speech. That we have free speech in the sense that if your speech is honorable and it doesn't have a malicious purpose, so non-malicious speech, that rules out the idea of yelling fire in the theater. It's perfectly okay to yell fire in the theater if you think there's a fire. It's perfectly fine. It's when you're doing it maliciously and lying. Then it's not free speech. There's no freedom to be a troll or an abuser, a rapist of freedom. And that's just kind of logical. So yeah, you're saying, yes, well, if people understood that free speech doesn't mean anything goes, and it certainly doesn't mean that what we're trying to protect is malicious behavior, because that's certainly not what we're trying to protect, is deception and chicanery and lies. So it's like having a telephone. We know what the purpose of the thing is for. Its purpose isn't to have some guy from India call me and tell me he's from Windows. That's not the purpose of the mechanism. So why are we allowing people to use it for purposes it wasn't intended for? There's no reason to do that, except somebody has some sort of notion in their head that this makes sense, and that's an idiot. Yeah, okay, you can call them humans, but before they're humans, they're idiots. The human part of them is a minor part. The idiot part is the big part. So, you know, not that I need to sit there and restore the dignity of humanity, but the truth is it's not all of humanity isn't garbage. There's reasons. There's specific kinds of humans with specific kinds of silly fetish notions of reality, fetish attachments to, you know, raping things. Um, you know, and that's what it is. And uh, you know, some people might say that you know, I go too far if I made it just simple argument that you know, so we have something that's really bad, you know, pedophiles. But I could argue it's just a fetish, like any other sexual fetish preference. That's all it is. They just prefer young people. Yeah. So how is it different than any other conditioned notion or any other conditioned attachment? How is it different than people's inability to let go of their religion? You know, it's clearly in the modern age been demonstrated to be just a silly story. There's no evidence for it, and there's a huge amount of evidence for a conflicting description of reality, where there's no roles for gods and angels and demons. So why is that okay? Because I would argue that that's abusing and molesting civilization. These silly notions of reality, you know, grown-ups, you know, these silly ideas of what's important. So again, this just relates to other people and other crap that you hear. So the head in the box guy, you know, they have some thing where they do, I pointed to it before, where they do these interviews talking about doom in a sense. It's sort of like my old doom, gloom, and boom channel. A lot of conversation about, you know, how failure is built into the system in a sense and into our behaviors and our activities. But you can also see they're very niche in terms of their perceptions of reality and some sort of little notion in their head. And so a couple of them seem to, the head in the box guy, I mean, he's going along with it in a lot of ways, but I mean, I wouldn't say he's guilty of this same philosophical disconnect. But they sort of think humanity is the problem. Like somehow the earth would be a beautiful place if human beings weren't walking on it. And it's just so crazy to think that there's anything, again, you're not seeing it, but every organism is designed to produce many more children than would be possible to sustain their population. That is, they kill, like 90% of their children are killed. That's how nature works. 90%. And in some things it's 99.99999999999%. Brutal. Nothing to sit there and say, oh, isn't that wonderful? What a wonderful life they had before we showed up. No, they had a horrible life. Dismal. And yes, we haven't improved it any for most animals. And the only improvement we've made in the sense that we've freed some of them from this horrible cycle. We've freed them from being food for some other organism. In some sense, we have improved their life by limiting how many of them are abused. Just the truth. How much they look like food. So nothing else is dependent on them, so they can live a little better. You might argue that whales live a better life in some respects because they're no longer does some other organism feed on them as easily. They're not obviously a sustainable meal because the meal comes around too infrequently. But yeah, it's just a brutal system. And obviously people just start off with these notions in their head of what reality is. And, you know, it's hard to get them to change those attachments. So I guess that's sort of what I mean by fetish, in the sense that it's something ingrained, they're raised in it, and it's really hard to get those people to even when you can make a rational argument, the reasoning just doesn't work because their personal visceral reaction is much stronger than that rational argument explaining how that's just superstition. You know, it's hard to talk somebody out of their superstitions because to them it's too frightening a prospect to you know, pretend that the voodoo doesn't really work and that they're going to curse themselves, and once they're cursed they won't be able to undo the curse, and then they'll get cancer, you know, because they stepped on a crack on the sidewalk or some other bullshit. And so that notion of attachment to some, you know, earlier, you know, childhood connection, and they just can't break it. They can't break the visceral reaction. The fact that that's how their physiology, in a sense, works. It's really ingrained, like your, you know, sexual proclivities, your what looks good and what looks bad. It's hard for me to make a rational argument to explain to you why something that you think is ugly is really pretty, and the things you think are pretty are really ugly. It'd be really hard for me to do that, especially in the pretty or ugly in the sense of sexually attractive. Can't just do it with words. And it seems like a lot of philosophy is a fetish. You know, people are so deep in it. And, you know, I sort of see some of this with the arguments I make in the physics channel, that these people just seem insanely attached, and they won't concede even the simplest things, like maybe their evidence isn't as good as it should be. They can't say the words. They can't admit a single flaw in their faith, you know, that maybe they're making a mistake. It's possible they've made a mistake and attach themselves to a wrong notion of reality. They just won't even consider the question. It's impossible that that could be true. So on that subject, I'll leave a link below. I did a pretty short 17-minute quick overview video of the physics theory in the simplest form, and I think it was pretty good, and yeah, so I'll link to it just because even a dummy could sort of understand. But physics is a complex subject, has lots of elements to it, and so, you know, the more you know, maybe the more you'll appreciate how much potential the theory has to explain an awful lot of phenomena that's been left unexplained. So anyway, this problem of communication. So again, you see it in a lot of people. I see a lot of people making videos lately that seem very frustrated in the level of the conversation, because it really is, if I want to defend any kind of civilization, then apparently I have to defend communism, and I have to defend Stalin and Lenin and everybody who ever had the idea of controlling anything. You know, every controller that ever existed, I have to somehow defend them, even though I'm not in any way connected to their process or their means or their philosophy in any way. Almost a zero connection. And you know, what's that about? I mean, that doesn't make any sense, but that's how bad it's gotten, the conversation. And I'd say that it's, you know, one side isn't more guilty than another side. There's fanatics on the left and fanatics on the right, and it just seems the number of people who are not ignorant fanatics, who just believe but don't really understand, way outnumbers the reasonable types. And you could argue you can just see it just glares at you with certain subjects like immigration, for example. You know, you're a bigot or a racist if you just make the simple argument that America was a certain thing, and it's just a truth, that it was basically white people, and it was basically this and this and this, and a certain amount of certain ways you lived. Americans lived a certain way. People were sort of proud that their houses would all have 6/6 windows and proper shutters, and you know, they sort of liked the fact that they had things that connected them to each other, and they had a certain sameness about them, like the Amish. You know, everybody's wearing the same shit, everybody's got the same look, everybody's talking the same language. It just makes life, that's kind of an American attitude of, it's a certain thing. Being an American isn't nothing. It's a certain thing, a certain kind of human, not any kind of human. And clearly immigration breaks that and basically says, no, there's not going to be American anymore. And it does get racial to some extent, just as a practical fact. It's just a fact of, you know, genetics and probability, and what time was going to do is that America will change. It will turn into looking like some other country. It won't look like America anymore. It won't look like old America. It'll be a different country. And it'll, certainly the cultural influences, if you don't do anything about it, then you end up speaking a different language, which we're doing. And soon it's going to be multiple languages. And so it won't even have language as a common denominator among people. And that's a hugely dangerous thing. You know, when you can't even communicate with each other in a country, I'm sorry, that's going to be failure. And the people who figure that out don't have to be racist. They just have to recognize that there's a certain efficiency and functionality and necessity, in essence, to being able to relate to each other. And the more obstacles we put in the way of that connectedness will create dissension and hostility and civil war, and it's not gonna be good for you, and certainly not gonna be good for any notion of what you're established as a country. So it really doesn't have to be about race or have to be about anything, but you have to recognize trends, and you have to recognize what is the inevitable outcome, and that's the inevitable outcome. That's exactly where immigration is heading America. It's not going to be a place that you call white. It's just not going to be. And some people, I think, have a right to say, well, I don't know if that's a good thing. I mean, white people aren't that bad, because in a sense it is an annihilation. It is an extermination of their existence. Just as we exterminated essentially the red man, you know, the Native Americans, we changed what America was. America was people of a certain race, and we came here and our race took over. Now, if people are empathetic to the Native Americans and recognize how that wasn't a very good deal, then why is it wrong for somebody to recognize it now and say it's not a very good deal? Okay, for the heritage that's been created over the last 200 years, 300 years. What Whitey has done in America or with America. And there is something to be, to acknowledge that it wasn't a complete failure. Okay, it did a lot of bad things, but it wasn't a failure. It did a lot of good things. So, you know, anyway, I don't want to get into a political argument, but I just mean that, you know, the fanatics can't see that. They're not going to pay any attention to what's really the argument. The argument isn't, I'm a racist and I don't want the world to have brown people in it. No, it's just that I don't want the seat I'm taking. I'm sitting in. I don't know why that has to be exchanged or changed. Why does this piece of America have to change color? Because that's really what immigration's doing. It's going to replace people like me with people like them. Just the truth. It's just a fact. That's what it's doing. Is there some other way to look at it? I don't think there is. I don't think there's any rational other way to look at it. And people are just arguing that I shouldn't care. And, well, I mean, I don't personally. But I mean, if I have to choose, I'd say, you know what, if you were replacing me with somebody more educated than me, or somebody who knew what a muffler was, or somebody who spoke English, yeah, then I'd say maybe it's a good deal. Go ahead and replace me. But you're not replacing me with somebody better than me. You're replacing me with somebody a lot less qualified and a lot less equipped and a lot less sophisticated. And that's just the truth. You know, with crazy religious theories and all kinds of other nonsense. I mean, stuff we were starting to finally get ourselves cleansed of it. You know, the sophisticated Europeans were finally, you know, letting go of the bullshit, and the Americans were starting to go there too. And now we're just bringing it back. We're just letting it take over again. Let the idiocracy win. Well, anyway, so this is a... like I said, I really don't want to get a political argument. I only brought it up because this is the divergence that's taking place, where people are turning into left-right. It's just in unreconcilable differences. And I would argue that that's the nature of the problem with being human. If the right humans, like the Roosevelt humans, okay, opposed to the Bush kind of humans, you know, the ones, if we follow one path, you know, the rational path, I would argue, you know, get rid of this God nonsense, you know, have humane insurance, and, you know, for people who have disabilities, and take care of this and take care of this Social Security thing, do some rational things to protect against the inevitabilities of life. And certainly, logically, you would argue that, yeah, the people making money off wealth, you know, stock investments, you know, making income, real income, shouldn't be paying a lower percentage to the person who goes to work every day. So the person who inherits a big pile of money and just makes wealth income, and let's understand they can deduct all their losses. So they're only paying taxes on their actual profits over their losses, right? And somehow their tax rate should be lower, half the tax rate of the guy who goes to work every day. Now that's just logically insane, right? I mean, the working man, the guy sweating, the guy totally inconvenienced, we tax at twice the rate we tax the person who just sits back and lets the market take care of itself. Like I said, they write off all their losses. Wouldn't you love to be able to write off all your losses? You know, your car breaks down, you get to write off your taxes. Every single thing that goes wrong in your life, every time you have to, you know, your refrigerator stops working, you get a new refrigerator, just write it off on your taxes. Wouldn't you love to be able to do that? Well, the rich can do that. You know, why shouldn't everybody be able to do that then? If that's the right thing to do, then why shouldn't we all be able to do that? Well, because we have to, you know, somehow they have a fetish. Rich people good, rich people make stuff, rich people productive, rich people do. No, rich people don't do. Rich people play golf and laugh at the idiots who vote for their billion-dollar tax cuts. That's what they do. They laugh at how they dupe these idiots, these kooks wearing their, you know, American flag tie, you know, and they fooled them, suckers. But yeah, that's what ruins America, is the suckers, the dupes, the retards, the religious kooks. Get rid of them, humans aren't so bad, you know, but life is still shit. So that's the other subject. So there's a prejudice for our nation, I mean our kind, our people who speak our language, people who are our color. There's always a prejudice of some kind, but a huge prejudice for this life thing, because, you know, you can't be anti the life thing. Not possible, because it's sacred. And you know, clearly it's just a infestation. It's just billions of years of organisms ripping each other to pieces. You know, murdering children. That's the #1 function of the evolution process. Kill the babies, the children, the little ones. Kill. It's you know, Freddy's nightmare times 10, literally, as a fact. And yet it's sacred. Yeah. The sacred murdering. Doesn't make any sense. You should be able to just logically point that out. What's the difference between Freddy Krueger and Mother Nature? Oh, Mother Nature kills even more children. Yeah. And tortures them even more. And creates more insidious monsters to do it. Little bugs that eat their brains out, and cancers and all kinds of shit to do the job. And then big teeth and crocodiles and spin your parts off. And all kinds of weapons and mechanisms to kill you brutally. Yes. So logically, Freddy Krueger, Mother Nature. And people still think there's, Freddy's much worse. No, Freddy's much better. Freddy's much more of a humanitarian and a sensitive, deep-feeling soul than Mother Nature. Mother Nature doesn't care, doesn't pay any attention whatsoever. So, it doesn't have to do the pay attention part. I just mean that in its process, the process of nature is far more murderous, far more likely to cause torture than Freddy. Far more efficient at it. Let's put it that way. Nature kills things. It just turns the grinder. It's no work at all. Freddy has to go through a whole bunch of process. So anyway, more complicated an analogy than is necessary. But the point is that argument is solid. You just can't do anything with it. It's just a truth. Nature is frickin' brutal. And they won't admit it. They won't concede a portion of that argument. They'll just pretend, no. Not nearly, no problem at all. If I lived next to it, I wouldn't mind at all. Go ahead. Kill shit every day. I can take it. And that's a sense what they're saying too. So, but then this gets into deeper arguments that I'll have to concede where, people are obviously just afraid to let go of their own life. And they sense that this need, this attachment they have to their life is the same as the value. So they don't really understand the difference between addiction, things that you want or desire because of mechanisms in your own wacky head, like for example your preferences sexually, that those preferences could be migrated anywhere and you'd gain just as much satisfaction and think it was just as beautiful, right? I mean, people who think some piece of modern art is beautiful, they're having the same experience as the person who looks at some 400-year-old painting and says it's beautiful. The expression is the same. It makes no difference what the thing is that's creating the sensation. So people associate their attachment with some sort of real value, as if it really is. There really are souls sitting in some prison somewhere that are just desperately saying, please let me out. Please let me get cancer again. I want to have cancer again. I want to watch my siblings die. Please, 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 I can't wait. Please, please, please let me out so I can watch that happen. Please, let me love something and watch it die horribly. Please, 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 let me out. That's, at least, that's not happening. So the simple answer is, don't make a mess, then you have to clean up a mess. Don't put something in jeopardy, then you don't have to make a fire engine to go rescue it. Simple solution. No problem. Making more humans will not solve the problem of your immortality. You will not be alive again, okay? Personally. It will not be you. It just won't. It's not going to happen. There'll be something like you, okay, concede. But you're certainly not going to give birth to the thing like you, okay? That never happens. The thing like you is going to be, the byproduct of some other copulation someplace else on the planet. We see that all the time. I mean, the kids are nothing like the parents. Don't look like them generally very much. You can barely see it. Oh yeah, he does have an incredibly long face and crooked eyes just like Daddy. But it's a tiny amount of real connection. You just barely can see it, barely. That's the common outcome. And then you have to recognize that this idea that, okay, make 1 million babies so one of them can be something like me, You got to understand how that doesn't make any logical sense. Make 1,000,000 ones that aren't, okay, that are going to be basically the people you don't like, the people who are ruining your culture, the people doing all kinds of other shit that you hate. Make 1,000,000 of those so they can be one of you. You know, in terms of, again, it's not going to be you. It's just going to be something that's going to be configured similarly in terms of how it thinks and feels and functions. It'll draw similar conclusions and might have some features that are similar to yours. But again, it's not really going to be that close. So what do you raise in your hand and say make more of them for? Well, why are you saying that? Well, what's the logic in it? Do you think the thems are all that spectacular? Do you really think the average human is worth voting for? Really? I mean, I wish I could walk up to people and ask them that question directly, with something at stake, like with a spear to their head or something. Don't lie. Don't be a fucking liar. You'd really vote for the average human? You'd make one? You'd make 1,000,000 of them? 1,000,000 Homer Simpsons? Good idea? No, I don't think so. Yeah, just so. What else is so? And then the bottom line, it comes down to clearly receptiveness to the argument. So clearly, I was receptive. Now, no one had to make the argument to me. I mean, I wasn't in an environment where there was any of these Nazi life haters. Okay, in my youth, I never ran across a single individual willing to say life is shit or stupid. This is fucked up. Never met such a person. So, but I was receptive to drawing the conclusion that this isn't quite the game they're propagandizing, because I was uncomfortable enough. I had enough discomfort just because of how my biorhythms, my innate sensibilities. I wasn't very durable, maybe you could say. I wasn't something, but a lot of stuff irritated me. It was too loud, and it was too smelly, and it was too sticky and good. It was too, everything was too something. So, so I was like maybe a little hypersensitive, and so I was uncomfortable a lot. Didn't feel very good a lot. And so I'm quite receptive to this argument that maybe this ain't so spectacular. So I can understand that if people live and they're not blighted by that, and it doesn't really, see, the other thing, it did bother me when things were hurt, harmed, crisis, something bad happened to one of my sisters, fell down and got cuts and stuff. I mean, stuff would bother me. And certainly if something died, it would bother me. It wasn't like, oh yeah, that's just nature. Too bad. No, it was bothersome. It was, why does it have to be this way? Why didn't it have to happen to him? Why did he have to get crushed or smashed or killed in this brutal way? It's not good. It's not acceptable in a sense. I couldn't find it. I didn't find it acceptable that, oh yeah, that's a great game to play. Watch things you care about get killed. I didn't find any, I couldn't make any redeeming out of that. Couldn't do that. It's all for the best crap. That the good stuff dies young and the shitty stuff walks around forever. Yeah, I don't see how that makes much sense. So I was just saying I was very receptive to any kind of evidence that might indicate this is fucked-hearted. It's not a good deal. You've been shafted into a really bad game, and you're stuck because this is how the game's played. People just create you, and then you arrive here on Earth and you have to do something with this thing called your life. and that's it. You're not, you as an individual can't do anything about it. You're not creating the problem. Some other mechanism's creating the problem. Some other mechanism created the vulnerability. I didn't make the bad decision. I didn't make the bad choice. I didn't do any of this shit. And there's actually religious kooks who actually think people exist because they did choose. I mean, it's just that insidious. That somehow, they have this. They have to rationalize it, so they have to take away their accountability. It's like Pyrrho saying, "I didn't have a kid. The sperm had a kid." I mean, it's retarded. It's so this lack of accountability, this running away from responsibility for your overt act. And blaming it on somebody else. I mean, victim blaming. Amazing. Fucktarded. Bad human. Bad definition of reality. How the game works. Very unfair cop or something. However to say it. So yeah, I was disposed to it. And so these other people aren't somehow disposed to it because they kind of get a feel for what the game is and playing it, and somehow I guess it makes sense, and they really don't mind the tragic things. They just get over it. Something bad happens, okay, you cry a little, boo-hoo-hoo, go eat some cake at a wake, and fuck it. We're done with that. Moving on. And yeah, they don't have any harping memories. And anything to slow down their enthusiasm, take the edge off the fun with some kind of context, some sort of understanding. So like the slave owner, they just sit in their mansion and enjoy their iced tea, where the slave had to go into the ice house and chip off the ice and do it. They don't care how they get what they got. They just take, and they don't care what the consequences are. They don't care about the ones who aren't enjoying it, the ones who aren't going to have a good time, the ones that are going to be ground up, the 9 others, so to speak, in the natural equation, who will be catastrophic losers for your success. And clearly that's a lot of people, especially these people who are in love with wealth, and it's permanent ownership by a class of humans who get to have wealth forever and control the economy and control everybody else's life, and in practical fact degrade the hell out of it, make their life half or 1/3 or 1/4 of the life they could have had, take chickens out of their pot, so to speak. Not that anybody should be eating the poor little chickens. Without the wealthy, you could have 4 cars in your driveway and work half as many hours. All they're doing is consuming resources, consuming value, an insane amount of useless consumption, useless production, useless maintenance. They're all high maintenance humans, insanely high maintenance. And just there's no excuse for saying that's a good idea. Just like there's be no excuse for making people let's make people in a coma and spend $1 million a year keeping them alive. Who would advocate for that? Who would say, hey, good idea. Yeah, we'll all win. We'll all have jobs taking care of the dying people. It'll all be really great and productive work. No, it's very wasteful work. It's just a waste, complete waste. Your life will not be enhanced because the work is wasted. So any work that doesn't do something like fix a telephone wire, or I guess I should say a communication cable, or do something like that, is junk. Okay, that's anything that's not providing for the infrastructure of your life is shit work. if it's not making something, if it's not building something, it's crap. It's waste. So much of the healthcare system, for example, just huge waste, because most of it is wasted on people who are already dead. At least, let's say 40%. 40% of the healthcare dollar is being spent maintaining dead people. It's probably a real number. 30%, let's say. It's probably 40. It'd be nice to know what the actual number is. You know, the nursing home number, the intensive care numbers, all that kind of stuff. How much money, you know, the incubator baby bullshit. How much money is wasted on things that aren't just barely alive. Just barely alive. It's insanely stupid. So is that the human race being stupid? Or is it those stupid people being stupid? Because it would never occur to me to say, yes, let's do that. Let's spend a whole bunch of money keeping dead people alive. That's a great idea. Now, it wouldn't even occur to me to think that was anywhere close to a good idea. It's like really far from a good idea. It's like the exact opposite of a good idea. Just like the right to die. You know, it just makes logical sense. If somebody has no will to live, they can't be hurt by being killed. You've taken the being dead part, now can't be a harm because they aren't afraid of being dead. They want to be dead. They're afraid of being alive. So you're just satisfying their desires, which can't be a bad thing. How is it going to be good for them? Like, say, if you could convert them even. Let's say you could, well, maybe we can convert them into wanting to live. Well, why would that be productive? Why is that an accomplishment? You could just more easily just spend a few dollars and you can save lives all over the world for a few dollars. Just, you know, there's people right now who are going to die in the world because they lack a dollar bill. $1 bill would save their life. Just a fact. So why would you spend a ton of resources trying to turn a person who doesn't want to live into a person who does want to live? And then spend all the money to try to keep them alive because they're still probably dysfunctional and disabled. What accomplishment is there in this? It's insanely stupid. So here we are forcing a bunch of people who don't want to be alive. It's me. I mean, you know, if you gave me the right to die in a humane and graceful manner, I would have died when I was 10 years old. I probably would have signed up when I was 7 or 5. I mean, there was never a point in my life where I had any real confidence that living was a great idea. I mean, I had never seen the evidence that whatever this process was, it was insanely brilliant. I was just seeing exactly the opposite, how it's insanely risky and dangerous. You know, I didn't see the brilliant part. Well, one part is sort of brilliant, but all the rest of it's crap. You know, so why? Why torment people, keeping them alive when they don't want to be alive? Spend a ton of money to force them to live. I mean, how is that logical? Oh, that's right, it's insanely illogical. And it's done because they have this religious fetish. They said, life is sacred. Yeah, no it isn't. It's a functional thing. And torture is a real thing. And you're basically just saying, better to torture than let it, you know, impugn the dignity of the sacred totem pole. You know, the sacred notion of you must survive, you must love life, because I do, you must. Is there anything more than that to this crap? You have a fetish, and you're basically saying anybody who doesn't have your fetish needs to be, we need to change him into one of us. We need to make him one of us. He's broken. You know, because he doesn't love watching things being tortured. Doesn't love going out into the woods with a gun and hunting down little animals and, you know, just pointing their little hairs at them, and, you know, so they can blow their little, you know, pop their little guts out. Ruin their day. Oh, you don't understand how much fun that is? Oh, you're broken. Yeah, you need to be fixed. No, they need to be fixed. You know, they need to be, you know, need a permanent solution. Anyway, just too fucking stupid. So that's really the problem. So the problem isn't humanity. The problem isn't epistemic. Like there's no such thing as, you know, whatever they say, power corrupts absolute power corrupts absolutely, or whatever, some other bullshit. None of those little cliches are right. It's just they're shitty humans, idiots, silly notions, you know, just enforcing and imposing an idea that mommy's right, daddy was right, my world is right, your world is wrong. They don't have any knowledge of how systems work. They don't know what a credit card really is. They just think, oh yeah, it's a magical thing. I can just keep spending money and I never have to pay it back. You know, I'm basically making a metaphor for government being in insane debt, as if it doesn't matter. You know, as if that doesn't have a consequence. When of course it does. Yeah, so there's no you can't even have the conversation, because these people don't even want to bother being knowledgeable enough of the details or the facts or any of that crap to be able to have the conversation. So, you know, this even relates to another part of the, you know, I was on the other channel, was listening to some people talking about global warming and stuff, and they just have silly notions of reality, and they actually write books with crap in it like this, like dinosaurs couldn't have gotten fossilized, you know, see, because when they die, something would eat them. And, you know, anybody who's done any research at all, or has any knowledge of how it actually works, is the fossils are always, most fossils are found in a collection of fossils where something dramatic happened all at once, and a bunch of animals were buried under a traumatic event. So a volcano ash like Pompeii, or floods or some other thing, and a bunch of bodies got buried under a ton of sediment, and those are the things that make fossils. There's no carnivores eating those bodies. You know, it's just so, I'm just saying, so it's complete ignorance of the subject, and yet they just say shit. You know, they just say it as if it's a rational argument. And that, you know, I mean, it's people arguing for a small Earth because they say dinosaurs couldn't exist in heavy gravity. Well, if they were in light gravity, then why did they have all those giant bones? Why were they built so simply? Like, why weren't they fancier than if they were in lighter gravity? Yeah, why were they built like they were in heavy gravity? They're built exactly like elephants and shit. They're built like heavy things are built, like big heavy animals are built. The big heavy ones walking around now, they're like, the mammoth is very much like the elephant in structure. So why is it like that if it didn't have the gravity problem? I mean, it's just completely illogical arguments, and people talk it like they actually did some research, or they actually have some knowledge of the science, or they actually studied it or thought about it or read a few books or did something to have some sort of competence to talk about it. And then some arguments are just so damn easy and simple. You're just saying, why are we even arguing this shit? Like the global warming argument, right? I mean, Jurassic period, no oil, no coal. Two of the biggest, hardest carbon sinks you can imagine. I mean, oil is that's like a lockbox. I mean, that's like a, you can't sink something more sunk than oil, right? I mean, it's not only sunk literally, I mean, where it's just inaccessible. It just has no chance of getting back to the surface. I mean, you just can't, you know, it's under layers of rock. I mean, it's so sunk. And then coal, okay, it's more towards the surface, but there's just no way to get it free. I mean, it's still locked in the sense that you can't really imagine how the coal falls back into the atmosphere. You know, there's no simple way for all of those coal fields to just all of a sudden fly back in the atmosphere. We never see it. I mean, maybe if there was another glacier period or something, some of it might be, but it would still have to burn. There's no, I mean, the environment isn't going to, I can put a piece of coal outside and it's going to take hundreds of years for that coal, the carbon, to get into the atmosphere. It has little chance of getting back in. So we have this huge amount of carbon just obviously sunk. So the difference between the 10-degree warmer Jurassic and now, one of the most obvious differences is one of the most important greenhouse gases has been sunk under the ground. And tons of it, like tons and tons and tons of it. That's the biggest difference. And what have we have done? We have released half of the tons of it that were in the form of oil. And we have to have a debate about human-caused global warming? There has to be some sort of mystery, like, well, how could that possibly happen? What are humans doing to change anything? Oh, they're completely reversing something that took 300 million years to create. And they're completely reversing it, completely moving backward in time, essentially. Taking the carbon profile of the Earth's crust and moving it backward in time. So why are we even having this conversation? How exactly is the carbon that the black crap, it's black, it's just pointing out to you how I'm full of carbon, okay? I mean, it's just pointing it out to you, and you've put it now back on the surface and in a form where you've actually shot it into the atmosphere, so there's no doubt about where you threw it. So it's like, yes, some pieces of it might fall as little particles on the surface, but it's clear you've made it an active player again. So why should this even be an argument? You know, there's just so many arguments. They're just like, you know, people and their fetishes. Their fetishes for their pets. You know, my pets are so important, but fuck those laboratory mice. Torture them all you want. I don't give a fuck. You know, it doesn't make any sense. What the fuck? You know, it's like this fetus argument. You know, oh, the fetus who doesn't have a developed brain, doesn't even know what gravity is yet, really. I mean, it's just totally clueless little bug inside of a woman's belly. Has just no references. And even the birthing process is traumatic, where it's got to get smashed through the hole and its skull gets crushed and all this shit and blah, 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 blah. But let's not even, we'll just forget about that. That's not torture. But anyway, it's got no sentient capacities and no reason to have them because it can't do anything. Like a plant, it can't do anything. So feeling wouldn't do it any good. There's no world for it to interact with. Okay, plants can't sense a fire and then run away. So there's no reason for them to feel because it's just not going to do them any good. The same is true of a fetus. It just doesn't, and human babies in general. That's why we don't even have memories. It's because we're not made to interact with the world in any complex way. I mean, a chimpanzee is born, it's functional in like 4 days. It's bouncing around, being kind of alert, grabbing things, doing all kinds of shit. And, 2 months, it's running around, swinging in the trees. Yeah, that's not what happens with humans, because humans have to do the language thing. Their brain has to be programmed very slowly, so the operating system has to be installed. So the thing there's no reason to think it has any functionality. And it certainly has a lot less functionality than the little mice you're sitting there saying, go ahead and inject it with cancer. So what sense does this make? It's murder. But that isn't. That torture and then death, that's not murder. Torturing something and killing it, no, that's not murder. How does that make any sense? It can't possibly make sense. There's no rational connection of facts that can make it make sense. The only way you can make it make sense is to put your wacky fetishes in there, your wacky biases and attachments. But you can't make it make sense out of something called facts or logic. So anyway, probably enough. Yeah, it's definitely enough, but so anyway, same process really. You're just it's still a struggle to find a way to argue that there really has to be a better process for humanity to argue and to be able to display how bad the arguments people are making are, to humiliate them into submission, you know, to preserve the distinction between good speech and hate speech, you know, honest good intentions and malicious self-service, propaganda and information. You know, because yeah, in this current environment, it's just really hard because people just label and run. They'll throw some mud and then run. But there's no obligation to get into the ring and fight for what they believe in or for what they wish to impose on everybody else. No willingness at all. And we got to make a mechanism that kind of demonstrates that to be the loser strategy, the black hat strategy, the troll strategy, the goblin strategy, whatever the evil, whatever, however. See, it's the problem is you can't even define an evil anymore because so many people have accepted malicious behavior as a positive character attribute. It's really that bad. The character deficit is as big as the idiocracy problem. You know, so there's two huge problems. People are idiots, and they also don't have shit for character. They have no sense innately. They were never. They don't have the fetish attachment to an idea of, you know, John Wayne integrity kind of thing. You know, maintaining, dying with your boots on, fighting a straight up fight. You know, they have no sense of that. They're just sneaky weasels, you know, and have the sneaky weasel perception of how to play the game. How much can I steal and get away with it? And if I get caught, it doesn't matter because I'm immune. I'm one of the privileged. Worst it'll do, I'll make $10 million and you'll fine me $1 million, and I'll still screw you for $9 million. You know, this kind of racket, and people are proud of that. Proud of playing a really lousy game. They're bottom feeders, bottom crawlers, worms. No character, no intelligence, no. They're just shitty. Yeah, shitty. So there's shitty people on this planet, and they have to be labeled that. They have to be called what they are, shitty. Now, nobody calls them shitty, and nobody makes it important. Then you're just passively allowing them to define the rules of the game. Because there won't be any other way to play but their way. If the rule breakers get to win, that is, if the guy taking steroids gets to win, or the guy who has dirty tactics gets to win, nobody throws flags, nobody pays any attention, then everybody has to play that game, in a sense. Because the only other way to do it would be to admit, I'm going into the game as a loser. I'm going to lose. You'll just be a nice guy finishes lasting. And there's no monument to the nice guys who finished last. They don't even have a monument in Washington, D.C. with an eternal flame to the nice guys who finished last. They don't even have one of those. So you either defend civilization and rationality and intelligence, or it'll turn to shit. And that's what it's, it's obviously, it's just getting It's being turned into shit. Yeah, right in front of our eyes. And people think these rich assholes are somehow going to save the day when they're not going to save the day. Yes, the we love the poor people assholes are a problem, but those rich people are the bigger problem, and they don't even get that. They're going to do less. They're going to do more damage, not less damage. But it is dismal. I mean, there's just irrationality on both sides. Definitely one side makes bigger piles of shit than the other. Anyway. Yeah, made the 1 hour mark. So I think that's really enough. Sorry, I'm just not myself. Yeah, see, well, that's probably, see, I'm still living a life that is viscerally uncomfortable a lot of the time. And so obviously that's why this just seems like important that this get fixed, because I feel it a lot. I get a taste of it. And just a taste of it tells you, oh yeah, I know I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, it's like you can have a little cut. You can understand that I wouldn't want one that goes all the way down my gut and exposes my organs. So, I mean, the one can give you a feel, a sense of what the threat is. And, you life lovers, you pro-lifers, you're just torturing people and animals. That's all you're doing. Your accomplishments don't exist. Your moments of bliss, however, whatever they really add up to, the tiny little, you know, Ziploc bag that you could put that shit in. You know, when you know most of your life is rather tedious and monotonous, you know, isn't worth torture. You're just being dupes and fools, and in the process, completely annihilating any notion of your productivity. You're evil, nasty, rotten, shitty. That's what you are. The universe would have been a better place without you. Anyway, until the next time, and such. Probably should end on some more kind of positive note, but I just don't have one. Sorry about the images. Still haven't put anything decent in here. It'd be nice once the fall thing happens or something, but who knows? Who knows what I'll do with this thing. I wanted to get the other camera running, but the stupid software. I mean, Linux is pretty good, been working pretty good, blah, 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 blah. So some guy left me a link to this, whatever, program from some guy making a video in another language. Well, anyway, so I loaded the program and it works on the one computer, but when this computer updated, you know, it just kills all my hard drive space. So something is totally incompatible. And I actually, you know, I went to the trouble to go to the website of the software, and it was like oh, this probably won't show up. No, it won't. I have to open a window for it. Oh, so I won't bother. But I went to the website, posted a thing, and nobody reads it, nobody looks at it. I mean, nobody, I mean, it's just amazing to me that of all the Linux users, nobody's using this program, and nobody's noticed this problem, or any other problem, or, you know, it's just surprising. I thought there was more people. I thought, you know, Linux was a little more, was used a little more aggressively. But I guess people who do anything with images don't bother with Linux. But anyway, yeah, so anyway, so the one program I was able to open both cameras really easy. You know, I could put them in here really simple, and unfortunately I can't use the program anymore because it just kills the computer. But anyway, I can't find a solution and blah, 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 blah. Maybe I'll do a video in the week in live room or something, talk about Linux or a little bit or something. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what I'll do. I'll do what I do. What I get to. When I get to it. It's the best I can do right now. Sorry. I'll work on it. Anyway, till next time. And such. Oh, I think that'll do.